So, the story that I would like to tell begins a little over 10 years ago. And I was drawn to come visit Pittsburgh because I was working on an exhibition out here. And I also had a very good friend who was interested in urban farming. And so we were doing a little bit of exploring in the area. And at that time, someone pointed out this building to me and brought to my attention the idea that a lot of buildings in the Braddock and North Braddock area were getting bulldozed, and that I had done a lot of collaborative projects before, and maybe I could take on this building and see about stopping it from being demolished and maybe even revitalizing it as a kind of a center for the community in North Braddock and also for my community of wayward, rootless artists. And so I had been involved in like dozens of collective projects and in projects where dozens of people came together to do really unlikely things that the rest of the world said, no, you can't do that, that's impossible. And so when I looked at this also very seemingly impossible space, I said, okay, maybe we could do this. I mean, we could try. And so I reached out to my art allies in the art world and abroad, and I set aside a huge chunk of my art sales, and I was able to actually purchase this building, and with an agreement that when it was brought up to code, some of the old back taxes would be forgiven. And so with a series of collaborators over the last decade, we've kind of jumped in and tackled various stages of the rehab of this building in ways that have been really fun and engaging. And so the first big problem that we had to take on was that a huge section of the building had been damaged by fire. And another thing that was going on, as I mentioned, the demolitions, that like these buildings day after day were just getting shoved into their foundations, crushed. And so not only were all of these building materials being lost that were viable to rebuild with, but the land was getting destroyed. And so a group of collaborators who do amazing projects all over this area. One of my favorites is that they've started a silkscreen shop in the Braddock Carnegie Library, and they run it. And they were at the time going by Transformasium was their name. And so they actually had this brilliant idea to work on deconstruction of this fire-damaged place. So they did workshops, educated themselves in deconstruction, connected with local contractors who also had an interest in deconstruction, and then spent months like stripping away parts of the building to get it prepared for the contractors to come in. And then they also hosted workshops so that folks in the neighborhood could learn a little bit more about this environmentally beneficial option. And cleaning all the bricks and just doing all of this like day-by-day work. It was really a beautiful thing to witness and to be able to participate in. And then right across from the lot of this church in North Braddock was a parking lot that was falling into disrepair. And so we decided to start activating that space as well because it was part of the property. And so Transformasium pulled up the concrete that was falling apart and then connected with the Braddock Youth Program and worked with kids on everything from farming to super adobe dome building. And at the time, I was simultaneously starting a project that was a post-earthquake rebuilding project that was working with folks who had suffered from the earthquake in Haiti. And so this particular project centered around the incredible efficiency and vitality of the earth bag, like ancient earth bag building techniques as they were being combined with modern building materials. And so the lot in Braddock was actually able to be a site for like the sort of pilot that would become this 10-year-long building project. And here's a view of the church from inside the dome window and working with one of the kids from the youth program painting. And so piece by piece, we would throw fundraisers and would repair parts of the building. So, close up that fire damaged section of the building or replace that dangerous belfry ladder or put in a power box or replace the doors and just kind of piece by piece. I am a visual artist primarily, and I'm somebody who really believes in beauty. And so, I tried to just like let each of these steps come alive through beauty. And so we made a lot of progress, and I was quite proud of the progress that we made, but there was still just these huge, daunting parts that laid before us. And one of the biggest ones was the roof. And so this is a rendering that's made by an amazing artist named Melissa Dennis, and she based this off of a vision that I had about how to fix this roof. And my thought was that if we could actually make the roof by hand by starting like an artisanal tile factory in the basement and hand producing all of the thousands of tiles that it would take to fix this roof. And the idea was that people could have meaningful work, people could get trained in these skills, and also, I think almost more importantly, people could have that pride of place that happens when you get to point at a beautiful landmark and say, I made that. And so, again, through a bunch of fundraisers, crowdsourcing, and working with artists, and just bringing together the community to try and make this happen. And with two artists, Katie Tierney and Katie Johnson, we were able to start Braddock Tiles. And, Braddock Tiles was, you, it was a small company, and I worked with them to create these kind of intricate designs, and then they also worked on creating more affordable tile designs that could be easily installed in homes. And they worked with the Braddock Youth Program, and they were working on soft skills and job readiness training, especially for folks that were aging out of the program. And this is a series of tiles that actually ended up in one of the last homes that was built as part of the rebuilding project in Haiti. And we also learned to silkscreen tiles. This kind of just became part of our vision, was these kind of art objects that could exist within your home, and sharing knowledge. And this is an amazing project that Katie and Katie did with the Braddock Youth Program that was about kind of claiming some of the history that was being lost about the civil rights struggles that happened in the local steel mills nearby. So just like a lot of really beautiful work happening and a lot of sharing of knowledge. And Braddock Tiles lasted for 5 years. And in that time, we kind of inched towards like building the skills and building the resources that it would take to fix that roof. But what we found was that the challenge was so big that we really were not able to accomplish it. And I want to pause for a second and just take this into a little bit of a personal space and talk a little bit about my life for a second. So around the time that I may have been about ready to double down into this really intense and difficult phase of the work in Braddock, my life just kind of shook me really hard. And it started with the death of my mom, who died of lung cancer, followed a year and a half later by the suicide of my father. And so these two events on their own would have been horrifically difficult. But the truth about my upbringing was that I had a lot of trauma that I needed to heal from. And when my parents died in that way, it just kind of brought all of it flooding back into my life with this urgency that was really fresh. And, there had been periods of my life where I was like, oh, that's fine. I can just run from that stuff and get over it and move on, and it's not a big deal. But when they died, it really became clear to me that I needed to go inside and I needed to do some serious healing. And that process brought me into some very dark places. And, the kind of places you ask yourself how you're going to come out of. And I did come out, and I am crossing through the other side, and I have done so much healing and so much growth. One of the things, thank you! Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And, it's one of the things that I discovered when I realized that in a lot of ways, I'm a different person now than I was 10 years ago when I first started working on this building. And so one of the very first things that this kind of new person had to accept is that the work of revitalizing this incredible, amazing space in this beautiful neighborhood is something that needs to be done by somebody who is there all the time. And looking at the direction that my life is taking me, I've also needed to accept that I can't be that person. And, standing up here and saying that to you guys brings up all of these incredibly painful feelings about failure and about not being able to finish what I started and not being able to carry the load that I picked up. And it's a lot, you know? I think we've all been there. But then in the back of that, there's this tiny little voice that's saying, hey, wait, like, what if there is another form of good that's hidden inside this? And what if it's the form of good that can only be found by looking really honestly at our own human limitations, as mortifying as that may be? But when we do, and when we see and accept that need for change, you know, what then? What can be born? And so, you know, right now, I kind of feel as though I'm getting pulled into this deeper layer of my own humanity by needing to admit and acknowledge that things don't always turn out how you planned them to. And I kind of hope that I'm like entering into this like long line of dreamers and creators who've fallen on their faces every once in a while and who've learned from it. And thank you. And so the thing, you know, that I'm hoping right now is that the work that we did, that we sort of carried through all of the potentials that this place can be, I'm hoping that that is something that can continue on. And, you know, that's part of why I'm talking about this here today, because I'm like, maybe in this room, some people have some connections to the potentials that are alive in this space. And, you know, I'm really starting to explore the idea that there are a person or a group of people who might be able to become the stewards of this place. And so, you know, it's a big conversation. It brings up millions of questions that I don't have answers to. And we're having the conversation more deeply in the community of North Braddock. And I'm also having the conversation here tonight with all of you amazing, beautiful, brilliant souls. And so I hope that if this has sparked any ideas for you guys, that you'll take a moment to come find me and talk to me later. And then I just want to end this with a quote from a guy named Wendell Berry. And it's one of my favorite quotes because I love the way that it really clearly expresses how when one thing ends, it opens up a space for something new to be born. And it goes like this: the grower of trees, the gardener, the man born to farming, whose hands reach into the ground and sprout. To him the soil is a divine drug. He enters into death yearly and comes back rejoicing. He has seen the light lie down in the dung heap and rise again in the corn. Thank you.